Hello and welcome to Recovery-Oriented Care, a NYAA's short video. My name is Ruth Cologne Wagner, and together we'll spend the next 20 minutes or so reviewing the philosophy and the practice of recovery-oriented care. We are the New York Association of Psychiatric Rehabilitation Services, or NYAAPers. We're a partnership of individuals who receive mental health services as well as people who provide those mental health services. We are a statewide organization with a national footprint. Our mission is to improve services and the lives of people impacted by psychiatric conditions. We do this by promoting their recovery, their rehabilitation, and their rights. And that is me. I'm a social worker and licensed in New York State. I've been in the field for around 29 years in a variety of different services. I currently work with NYAAPers as the Director of Training and Development. This video is made for the PROS Adult Home Outreach and Curriculum Project. We are extremely proud to support the PROS community to assist people living in adult homes to be independent. Please visit our website at pros.nyaapers.org, and there you will find information on financial reimbursement for outreach. And you're also going to find several curricula that were created specifically for this project, specifically to assist people living in adult homes or state psychiatric centers to live independently and to maintain their independence. Our learning objectives for today are to understand the changing landscape from traditional to recovery-oriented care, and to identify strengths and challenges that you may face in achieving a full recovery practice orientation. It makes sense for us to begin with a definition of recovery. Please pardon me, but I will be reading this. Recovery is a deeply personal, unique process of changing one's attitudes, values, feelings, goals, skills, and/or roles. It's a way of living a satisfying, hopeful, and contributing life, even with the limitations caused by the illness. Recovery involves the development of new meaning and purpose in one's life as one grows beyond the effects of mental illness. There are many definitions of recovery, all equally wonderful. But I brought this one to you here today because it's this definition that really just speaks to me as a provider. It gives me a hopeful feeling that the work that I do every day can help a person to live that satisfying, hopeful, and contributing life, with the understanding that they can do that even with the limitations caused by the illness. So, what does mental health recovery mean to you? I'd like for you to just take a moment, find a pen and a piece of paper, and pause this video and write down just a few bullet points of what recovery means to you. We're going to revisit your list at the end of this training. Let's review some basic principles when practicing recovery. First and foremost is believing that recovery is possible. Believing that people can recover. That's the cornerstone of recovery. And if we don't really believe it, it can unintentionally come out in our work. So the question really becomes, how do we get there? Collectively, as an organization, how do we all provide recovery-oriented care? And as individual practitioners, how do we get there? I share my own journey as to how I, as a practitioner, I went from an unbelieving person to a wholehearted advocate of recovery. That video can be found on the Recovery Clearinghouse. I won't read each of these on the screen, but let's review some. Second, recovery is highly individualized. What works for one person works for one person. That's very much in keeping with person-centered care. Also, recovery involves more than symptom reduction and can occur even though symptoms reoccur. We're going to spend some more time on that in this video. Recovery occurs in the presence of someone who believes in and stands by the person. That can be friends, that can be family, that can be you, and it can be a combination thereof. And recovery from the consequences of the illness is sometimes more difficult than recovering from the illness itself. Now, what do I mean by this? Think about it. Years of frayed relationships with family and friends, that separates people. It causes loneliness and other hardships. Before we go through the change of focus, let's just review a little history as to how recovery-oriented care became mainstream. First, it was mandated by the Surgeon General back in 1999. That was followed by the New Freedom Commission, and that was followed by the Affordable Care Act. What they all have in common is that they emphasized that mental health care must be recovery-oriented. All right, so let's look at how recovery is different. We're going to compare the traditional medical model with the recovery model. First, the traditional model focuses on symptoms, whereas the recovery model focuses on the entire person, on their life. So do we negate symptoms? Absolutely not. But we focus on the entire person. And then in the medical model, the client is seen in the context of the system. So what do I mean by that? Let me just give you a brief example of what a progress note, for example, might be like. Jane Doe has been a member of PROS for 3 years. She has schizophrenia since she's 25 years old. She's had 2 hospitalizations, etc., etc. When you look at it from a recovery-oriented perspective, that same progress note would start different. So let's just give you an example of how that might be. Jane Doe is 54 years old. She's a mother of 2 adult children, etc., etc. So the person is seen in the context of their lives. In the medical model, it emphasizes deficits and needs. And this really does make sense because we have to identify a medical necessity for billing purposes. But somehow we lost our way and focused just on that. In the recovery perspective, we understand that people have strengths and gifts and capacities. And people use their strengths to meet their deficits and their needs. And it's our work to help sometimes people to recognize that they have strengths, to recognize that they're resilient so that they can then face those deficits and those needs. In the traditional medical model, there is one expert in the room. And who's that? That's the provider. No matter what your discipline, psychiatrist, social worker, mental health counselor, it doesn't matter. In the recovery perspective, there are 2 experts in the room, the provider and the client. And it's not just us knowing that the client knows themselves best, because of course that is one of their expertise. They know themselves best. But it's our valuing their experience and that knowledge that makes all the difference. So this left side versus the right side. In social work school, they never taught me recovery-oriented care, and that may be because it was quite some time ago. But the traditional model is really what gets taught in schools and is what we as providers experience in most of our work history. There are many services that practice this way, and it is through the culture of the organization that we learn these from those organizations that did not practice recovery. Thankfully, more and more organizations are practicing in a recovery-oriented way and requiring their workforce to do the same. If each of us purposefully and with dedication, we learn and we practice recovery, the people that we work with, they will be the beneficiaries. They will find hope, they'll find wellness, and they'll achieve their goals. They will thrive. So, please do not think that recovery-oriented care does not pay attention to symptoms. We do. We just know that people are more than just a bag of symptoms. Recovery is not about the absence of symptoms, but it's about the full life. What brings that person pleasure, love, life, happiness, and purpose? This is our mandate and our role as helpers. Let's focus on the entire person and not just one tiny aspect of who they are. It's important for us to use our listening skills for cues that will help us point the person in the right direction towards pleasure, love, life, happiness, and purpose, whatever that is for that person. As we said, recovery is as individualized as there are people. You can be that one provider in their entire life who listened and cared enough to bring them happiness. You all know this. Recovery is not linear. As professionals, we know this because we see it. People come and go. They need us, then they don't, and maybe they come back. This back and forth is natural as one works recovery. Or they're here needing us, but need more support than, say, someone else. We also know that recovery is not linear from our own personal experiences that may or may not have anything to do with mental illness. Let's think about weight loss or quitting smoking or trying to have a healthier lifestyle or having healthier relationships. So, our own recovery from whatever is not a straight line. So, please don't give up. As we do this recovery work, please keep in mind that people who have lived with their illness for a long time may have a slower time achieving recovery. They may bounce back slower. It's harder to realize goals when you haven't had any for so long. Sometimes we may think, yes, it's all well and good to talk about recovery, but there are some people out there who are just too compromised to achieve it. To this, I'd like to talk about learned helplessness. It's defined as the general belief that one is incapable of accomplishing tasks and has little or no control of the environment. Let's look at a general example. A person who performs poorly on a math test and math assignments will quickly begin to feel that nothing he or she does will have any effect on math performance. I'd like to share another example, the pink baby elephant there. In some countries around the world, baby elephants are tied up to a stake in the ground when they're young in order to avoid them from running away. Now, when they're older, they're still tied up, but they're elephants. They've got the strength to pull that stake up and out of the ground very easily. They've been conditioned early in life to believe that they can't pull up that stake out of the ground. Even when they have the strength, they still believe they can't do it. And you know what? Many of the people we work with have exactly this. For example, years of institutionalization, hospitalization, or community day treatment centers or other type services and programs. Some of these places do for the person, and they do not expect anything from them, thinking that they're too sick or too compromised. You may also find that people may not have goals. It's not that they don't, but because the word goals has been commodified. Whose goals are we talking about? Their goals or the goals of the treatment team? To this we say, ask them their beliefs, ask them what their hopes and dreams are. Maybe let's get away from the word goals and go back to that visceral place we all remember when we were about 5 or 7 or 8 years old and someone asked us what our hopes and dreams were. They probably have changed after all these years, but we all have them. This is a story that I just love, and I heard it from Dr. Larry Davidson of Yale University when I was at a conference in New York City several years ago. It's a story about Finding Nemo, and that's the name of a movie, if you don't know it. I have a little legend here on the lower left-hand side because sometimes I just forget the names of the characters. The dad is Marlin, and he is the large clownfish, orange clownfish, on the right-hand side of the screen. His friend is Dory, and she is the bluefish, and the son, Nemo, as in Finding Nemo, is the middle clownfish. So the story goes like this. Nemo is lost. He was following a boat who snatched him up to take him to Australia to add him to his exotic fish collection. You may notice that Nemo has a disability. He has one small fin, and what you don't see is that he recently experienced trauma with the death of his mother. He was on a school trip. He sees a boat. He becomes interested and decides to follow it when they take him. Marlin then meets Dory, and he's frantically trying to find his son. Dory is smart. She's witty. She's kind. She's helpful. And she's also ditzy, who just so happens to have short-term memory loss. Together they cross the ocean in search of Nemo, almost getting killed by sharks, mines, and jellyfish. Now they find themselves in the belly of a whale, and Marlin is just completely dejected and hopeless. Dory sees that and says to him, "Aw, it's going to be okay. Everything will be all right." Marlin just says, I promised him. I promised him that I'd never let anything else happen to him. Dory then says, "Oh, well, that's a weird thing to promise. If you don't never let anything happen to him, then nothing will ever happen to him." If nothing ever happened to us, we would not be the people we are today. If we didn't take the chance of applying for college, we'd never be accepted. Didn't ask that person out on a date, we never would have had that experience. If we didn't apply for our jobs, we never would have been hired, and so on and so on. We are the people we are today because we were strong enough to take risks and because we had people in our lives that believed in us. You know, as providers, we all do this work because we want to help people. We care for the people we work with. We care for them and we want to protect them sometimes. But there is no life without risk. You know, as parents, we expose our children to love, to happiness, and yes, even to disappointment. We don't get to experience gratitude, fulfillment, and find our purpose if we don't take risks. I've been a provider for a long time, and I've learned, yes, by trial and error, that it is not my place to withhold opportunity. I felt the pain when someone I worked with felt disappointment. For example, they were not chosen for the job. But I've also experienced great joy and pride in people that did take chances and got what they were after. Earlier in this video, you wrote down what recovery means to you. Keep those near you now. Now I'd like to ask you about your practice. Now, your practice has nothing to do with having a quote-unquote private practice. Your practice is everything that you do and say in your work. With that in mind, what recovery-oriented strategies would you implement tomorrow now that you've learned a little bit more about recovery? Please pause the video and then press play when you're ready to continue. As we get close to the end of our video, let's distill all of what we learned to some important next steps. The first bullet, identify your practice change priorities. Is there anything that you'd like to change or add to the way that you practice? Think back to the basic principles slide and to the change of focus slide for some guidance. Staff training. Identify trainings that you're interested in and share that with your supervisor. Chances are that if you're interested in it, someone else is as well. And if you're a supervisor, identify the trainings that would best assist your staff and your department to increase their recovery skills and change the culture of your services. Create a team approach, one that's dedicated to creating a recovery-oriented program. Creating a team requires everyone's dedication to changing the culture from traditional to recovery. Work on creating that strong team as you'll all work together on this one big project. You'll rely on each other, and when it gets hard, you will all need each other to support one another. Engage people to activate them in their care. Work hard to engage people in their care using the recovery-oriented principles that we discussed today. That helps to activate them. All the wonderful evidence-based practices in the world won't work if the person is not there to benefit from them. And teach people that you work with about recovery. Remember that as you have received education on recovery, so do the people you work with need that same education. So during your sessions and in groups, begin the conversation about recovery and help to empower them and give them hope for the future. Lastly, hiring practices. Hire people that believe in and practice in a recovery-oriented way. So for supervisors and managers, as the culture shifts in your services from traditional to recovery, hiring people who already believe in recovery and practice in a recovery-oriented fashion, they will complement your team and they will add strength to your team. Earlier in today's video, I shared with you the Boston University definition of recovery. As you recall, that particular definition speaks to me and it helps to fuel my work. Another is this quote from Dr. Pat Deegan. Allow me to read it with you. It is our job to ask people with psychiatric disabilities what it is they want and need in order to grow, and then to provide them with good soil in which a new life can secure its roots. And then it is our job to wait patiently, to sit with, to watch with wonder, and to witness with reverence the unfolding of another person's life. Thank you for taking the time to watch this NYAA short video on recovery-oriented care. If you're interested in the full version of this topic and/or any of the others, please contact the trainer for your region listed on your screen. We offer a full and comprehensive list of trainings to offer you. Use the link on this website to access our brochure. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, Ruth Cologne Wagner, at ruthcw@nyappers.org.